Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. Looks like it's the end of the conference. So I'm Gaurav. I work at Flipkart. I'm managing the team that builds mobile apps for a line of products that we call Flyte. So a quick show of hands, how many people here have heard of Flyte? Okay, pretty good. How many of you use Flyte, bought songs off of Flyte? And how many of you use the Android app? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Android app, of course, this is DroidCon. We also do iOS and Windows 8. This is all about the Android app. And I'm going to talk about how we've switched our development model recently in the last 2 months to follow something that's called the Lean Startup methodology. How many of you know what Lean Startup is? Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. So I need to be here? Okay. So why are we doing Flyte MP3? The reason Flipkart is traditionally physical goods. The reason we're doing Flyte MP3 is we wanted to get into digital. And we do believe there's a market for legal music downloads. It's going to be interesting in India. People aren't used to it, but we believe there's a market. It's also an interesting way to get into digital. It's easier to do music than other types of content. It's DRM free. The size of the files are smaller. So that was another good reason to go. But primarily it was the business reason. We think the market is meaningful. And Flyte is basically DRM free music downloads. How are we going to make it happen? So one is that we are trying to build a catalog of really good content at attractive prices. So the pricing that we offer is better than anything you'd get at most international vendors. And we also have a lot of Indian content. We also have a lot of indie content. NH7 is a label that sells music off of Flyte. So these are some differentiators. But the thing that I'm more concerned about here is, okay, my slides completely. I'm more concerned about the user experience, right? How do we make the user experience so compelling that people want to buy from Flyte over and over again, as opposed to going to BitTorrent or songs.pk. So I'm just going to go through the app. This is the home page. We show some featured content. There are a bunch of albums. There'll be new international releases, new Hindi releases, top albums, top tracks. These are just sort of things that we think might attract people right away. Once you find an album you like, you can try to buy it. You can buy either the whole album or individual songs. Again, the pricing is cheaper than, it's actually even cheaper than buying CDs in India for most albums. You can search for artists, albums, songs, and the app also has your own library, so the songs that are downloaded on the device, as well as songs that are on the device from before. Not Flyte songs, but songs that just happen to be on your phone. And it also will show you songs that you've purchased but have not downloaded. Right? So you could have songs that you bought from the website that are in the Flyte cloud. The library shows you that. And once you want to start playing music, you go to the player. So a little bit about the evolution of the app. We started off with a version 1, and that was developed in about 2 months, shipped in April. And the next release shipped in August. So for about 4 months, we didn't have a big release going out there. The second release, this is the Android app. So the Flyte store, the website launched in February. The first Android app was April. The version 2, no, it's not a phone gap app.
Okay, because the version I got off the market looks like a phone gap app.
Flyte or Flipkart Retail?
I just searched for Flipkart and I got something and I installed that and it's honestly crap.
Yeah. So that's the Flipkart Retail app that lets you buy physical goods off of the Flipkart store. And we do want to improve that. But this talk is focused on the Flyte app, the MP3 app. And now if you look after the 2.0 release, you will see that we did about 5 releases. This graph is from the Google Play market. So you're seeing user adoption. And each of these releases happened in about a week or a 2-week period. And again, this is the period that I'm going to focus on in this talk. So what's the basic idea behind lean startup? So a lot of software companies have a product definition in mind, and they'll go off and build it and spend 6 months building it, and then maybe show it to customers at beta stage, maybe show it later. That doesn't really work if you're a mobile app, and definitely not if you're a website. And Lean Startup talks a lot about before you spend a lot of time building something, test your ideas out, right? So there's the ideas build code, which we all know about. But the interesting part is the measure. So get some data about what you've built, and then learn from that. If you were going to do 6 features that were all related, and you imagine build 2 of them out, and people don't use them at all, then you don't need to waste time on the other 4. So again, a lot of startups, a lot of companies are doing this sort of development. Lean Startup is a methodology that just formalizes a bit. It just sort of gives it some structure, and this phase of measure and learn is pretty key. So we started off looking at our app and saying, what are the things we're optimizing for? What do we want? What are our metrics? So one of them is customers. We want to make sure that, and again, metrics are important. If you don't have metrics, you don't really know whether your feature is helping you or not. You could spend a lot of time building stuff. If it's not getting you more users or more revenue or whatever your goals are, then there's a problem. Right? So customers, both repeat customers, new customers, and active installs of the app, these are some metrics we look at. Net Promoter Score. So a lot of companies, so how many of you have used Flipkart and have recommended it to your friends or family? Okay, sorry? Trick question. How many of you have used Flipkart and have told people not to use it? Awesome. Are you just saying that because you don't want me to throw things at you? Okay, so the first group of people were the promoters, the second group were the detractors. Net Promoter Score is kind of like promoters minus detractors. How likely is it that people are going to say good things about your app and get other people onto it? And that's a very important way to get more adoption. So we had some sub-metrics. How effective is search? How effective was that homepage? How many errors are our users facing? And another big metric was revenue. So things like how much are we making from the songs and how much are people topping up the wallet from the app. And this graph actually shows us some relative numbers. And it does tell us some interesting things. So this phase in the middle, these 3 low points, that's actually when we had a problem with logins and people were getting logged out of the app. So that we should have found this out earlier, but this tells us something. I believe at this point we did some things on the search side, and that may have improved adoption. So seeing this data is helpful. It doesn't necessarily always tell you what to do. You need to spend some time analyzing it, but this data is very useful. So now I'm going to talk about some of the lessons that we learned building this app. So the first part is crashes. How many of you only rely on Google Play for your crashes of the app developers? Okay, good. So Google Play sucks. It doesn't tell you most. It probably tells you 1 or 2% of your crashes. There are some. Google has a library called Acra. There's a commercial product called BugSense, and we ended up using something called Criticism. So Criticism is telling me that for this version, we've had 72 crashes, 21 crash groups, so 21 types of errors. And sometimes that 21 also ends up being fewer, like they resolve into the same crash. This is, again, if your app crashes, people will uninstall. And Criticism is a good tool for that, for measuring that. How many of you have written code like this? And I'm talking about the second part, the catch block. Okay. So let me ask the other question. How many people have always catch and handle checked exceptions in the right way? Okay, so either you guys are the best developers in the room or you're the biggest liars in the room. But
I know which one I am.
And that's good. Sorry? Burnt and learned. Right? Now, this was a problem. We had an existing app. We were doing this in some places. We didn't have the bandwidth to go and fix it everywhere. You can't just start fixing every piece of code when you also have certain business deadlines to meet. So I added a simple library, a simple class that logs these exceptions. See, if you're catching it and not doing anything, it basically means that you think it's not a problem, ideally. What I'm doing here is I'm sending it back to a server, which happens to be criticism. And now I can look at all of these exceptions and figure out which are the ones that are real problems, which of them can be ignored. And the ones that can be ignored, I will just comment out. So again, this...
Gaurav, just a little tidbit.
Sure.
So the criticism folks presented at DroidCon London last week.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, we couldn't get them to India, although we were trying. One of the things that they threw up, which I thought was very interesting, is that iOS apps crash a lot more than Android apps. Okay. It's in their stats. They've got lots of data to prove the fact that iOS apps crash more,
sure.
Despite the fact of user perception that Android apps tend to crash more.
Sure. So I'll tackle that. I mean, we can talk about it at the end, unless you want to give me 15 extra minutes. Okay. Okay. The other big thing is analytics. So there are libraries like Google Analytics, Flurry, Omniture. We're using Omniture because the rest of Flipkart uses Omniture. Tells us a lot of things about user behavior. Here, we're seeing the effectiveness of search. We're seeing the effectiveness of the homepage. And interestingly, we have those 5 categories: top albums, top international albums, new international releases, new Hindi releases. We're actually seeing which of those are leading to more, which are the ones people are clicking on more. And that helps us figure out, where to spend, or where to sort of focus on. So on the same lines, we did realize that we need to get content out there and make it a lot more enticing. So this was the first cut of the app, and when you open the app, you get to see these albums. This is a new version. So the first one looks clean, but it doesn't really look that nice on a small phone. And the new one has nicer, higher resolution albums. This is something that we're following the Android Holo theme, and we did a little bit of analysis and saw that the click-throughs on the homepage weren't good enough, so let's try to change it. Another thing is parity. So if your app isn't as good as Google's default apps or some very basic apps out there, people won't use them. This is what our original library looks like. And in fact, this is the one that's still in the market. So to play a song, you have to go to the offline library, then you have to go into tracks, then you have to find a track, add it to the playlist. People got bored doing that. This is our new library, should be coming out soon. Much closer to the sort of patterns you see. So this was just another learning. Like, I mean, it's kind of more obvious when you use the app. Ad marketing. So we tried using AdMob for driving up app installs. And it did drive up app installs, but we saw app uninstalls drive up almost exactly the same rate. So we weren't effectively seeing new users getting on. We don't know whether this is because the expectations weren't set. Like when they saw the ad, they thought maybe they're getting free music, or whether it's the stability issues in the app or some of the product issues. And the nice thing is that we ran this with a very low budget, got some feedback, learned from it, and we're probably going to run more campaigns and see if that helps us. Logging. If you have a production app and people are saying it's misbehaving, you can't get that device and debug it. So I'm a big fan of logging. I've worked in enterprise products, so maybe that's where it comes from. But I wrote a simple wrapper around the Android logger because otherwise people were writing log statements, then commenting them out before a release. And this way you can just set log levels, and it's just a wrapper library. You can plug in log4j or anything else you want, but it's kind of nice. So, I mean, again, the point here is if you don't log, you won't know what problems people are facing. I'll quickly go over some tools or some things we liked. Memory analysis tool helped us find memory leaks. Bugzilla, so we track bugs, we track issues. If it is tracked in emails or Evernote or other disparate places, it gets forgotten. Bugzilla also gives us a good sense of how many issues there are in the system. 99tests is a Bangalore startup that does crowdsourced testing. They have testers using their platform. You give them an app or a website, and those testers will use it. The nice thing is it gave us device coverage. So people had all sorts of mobile phones, and we found quite a few good bugs from this. Code reviews. So how many of you know what code reviews? How many of you don't know what code reviews are? Okay. So code reviews are when if a developer is about to check something in, show the code to someone else, let another developer make sure that the code doesn't have obvious bugs, is more or less consistent, and it's following sort of patterns that we've talked about and agreed on. And it's a great way for developers to learn from each other. So helps catch bugs and helps generally make life better. And Little Eye Labs, and I see them sitting somewhere here. So they have a product for monitoring battery consumption. And I've used a demo of it, looked good. I think we haven't gotten to the stage where we're using this on a regular basis, but I think it's something we definitely want to optimize. There's another service that I really liked. It's called Many More. How many of you have seen this or used this? Okay, so Many More it's just a website that runs Android emulators. So as you can see here, you pick a resolution, and it'll show you the supported OSs, and you just launch the emulator. And you can upload your APK. It'll install it on those devices. So in 5 minutes, you can see what your app looks like on, 50 devices. So these are not real devices, the emulators, so there are some restrictions, but it's very good for UI. Are your controls looking, the way you expect them to? And yes, a quick plug, we're hiring passionate Android developers and mobile developers, iOS and Win8 as well, or just passionate developers. And I'm going to sort of use a Kent Beck quote. So how many of you know who Kent Beck is? Okay, so big guy in the world of agile, wrote a very good book on refactoring, I think. So his quote is that I'm not a great programmer, I'm a good programmer with great habits. And I really like that because a lot of these are about habits, doing certain things. Because when you're in this iterative agile model, moving very fast, things will break. You can't catch all of your bugs up. Some things will help you catch bugs, but it's these habits that will really lead to a better quality product. So that's all I have. Open for questions. Yep.
Hi. The lean philosophy actually talks about when you are not able to make a decision, let's say, on your home screen, you are undecided about two things. You want to go for A/B testing and then test it and find out, which my customers might like. So in your 3 releases, have you done any sort of A/B testing across mobile apps?
Yeah, it's a good question. A/B testing. So A/B testing is, just in case people don't know, A/B testing is a way of putting out 2 versions of the app or the product and measuring how each of these are perceived. If people like version A more than version B, then there's probably something better in version A. So it's very useful when you're not sure about which way to go. Broadly, we've looked at some frameworks. Clutch.io is open sourced. None of this was done with A/B testing, but it's still lean because we are trying to measure the effects of what we've done. Right? So lean startup isn't A/B testing. A/B testing is one of the things that will help you. And again, we're trying to make data-driven decisions. We're trying to do something, see the results of that change, see if it's helping us go in the right direction. Are we getting more users? Are we getting more revenue? And based on that, we're trying to decide what to do next.
So to measure the metrics itself, so you might want to have like a list of hypotheses, right? So in your first release, probably how many did you have, or how did you validate them?
So what we did, typically in each of these, I'm going to call them sprints, though they're not the theoretical Scrum sprints. In each of these sprints, we did talk about some of the features, and we talked about whether the hypothesis, as in, do we think this is going to lead to so a good example is that homepage. We thought that this new homepage would lead to a lot more click-throughs, and it actually didn't. So by implementing it, that we learned that our assumption was wrong. We also realized, I mean, we spoke to a couple of people, showed it around, and people said, hey, this is, like it opens up on new Hindi releases. And they said, yeah, this is cool, but they didn't realize that you have to swipe left or right. And then we made it a lot more visible that, so there is something on the right and the left. The first version had it grayed out. So after that, we saw a little bit more uptake. So we're learning.
One of the main points of lean startup assumptions is that to have fast build, measure, learn cycles.
Yeah.
But on mobile, there's a limit to how many times you can push a new update to the app.
Yeah.
So what is your strategy towards that? How do you?
Yeah, so that's another thing we keep discussing. So we started off, so the basic issue here is if you keep pushing out updates, your users will start to get unhappy. So we talked about this. We first said, let's try weekly cycles. We ended up doing cycles that are roughly 2 weeks long. We haven't really heard a lot of complaints about that. We've seen a lot of people. So we've seen a large set of users who I think are just setting it for automatic upgrades, updates. Because the day the app goes out, we see those things, those installs get updated. We see a set of users that are not updating. They're still on version 1. But I don't think the 2-week cycles have really upset people. At least we haven't. We've done other things to upset people, but this wasn't one of them.
Hey, one of the things that you said was that the analytics. I just wanted to know, so is the Flyte app a native app? If it is so, then how are you using the analytics that you're using in the website, the same analytics tool?
Sure. So so the Flyte app is a native app. Omniture is a service, right? It's an analytics service that has, so it has an SDK for Android. So on Android, whenever, let's say the landing page, we basically send an event. And when I said we're using the same analytics as the website, it's the same, on the server side, it's the same system, but the way the client sends the analytics is obviously different.
What is the name, you said?
Omniture. But if you don't have a lot of, I would say that go with something small. Like Omniture is good if you're a big company doing a lot of website stuff. If you're just doing mobile apps, you're probably better off with Flurry or Google Analytics. The problem with Omniture is someone has to configure the server side first, and then you have to do the code changes on the app side, and then sometimes they don't work, so then you have to fix the server side and then come back to the app. With Google Analytics, it's all on the server, as in it's self-serve, and with Flurry also, I think it's self-serve. Haven't used it, but. Any other questions?
Why don't you have a Flipkart API?
Why don't we have a Flipkart API? Not in the scope of this talk. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi. You talked about Flipkart and Flyte being very data driven. So one problem that I've personally faced with analytics on mobile is that you're not very sure about what data you want to record or what you don't want to record, because very often you tend to draw certain assumptions or some questions that you ask. So it's about what question are you asking. So the data is often will tell you wrong things. So how do you go about recording?
Yeah.
Like what do you want to record and what do you don't want to record?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. You just learn. So we put in some analytics, some events that we thought are useful. Once we started getting that data, then there were related events, right? Hey, so this has gone up. People are clicking more on this page, but now what are they doing on the page? Are they scrolling up and down? Are they scrolling left and right? So there are a lot of cases when you add one set of analytics, and then you realize that you need to do more, and you just do it in the next release. And that happens pretty often. You can't figure it all out at once. So that's again why the iterations are nice. You put it in your next cycle.
Hi, Gaurav.
You're not allowed to ask hard questions, Ravi.
First of all, great talk. I was just telling Amrit, you make Flipkart seem more human by just the way you talk. That being said, off late I've been buying a lot of songs from Flyte. This is on the website related, it's not with Android. I noticed the recommendations that you provide are at the bottom of the page. I have to scroll all the way down to get recommended. Any particular reason why?
Again, not really in the scope. I mean, I don't work on the website side of things, but is there something you want? Do you think you can tackle that? Or? So, Rahul's the director for Flyte. So if you don't want to, if you're not really happy about stuff, throw things at him, not at me.
Hey, don't kill the messenger. Yeah. So, are you talking about the placement of the recommendation widget itself and why it's below the fold rather than above the fold? Yeah. So actually, we have two sets of recommendations. One is based on the history, and the other, as we say, is similar products, right? History of purchase and similar products, and we are in the process of redesigning our pages for improved layouts. It's just historically carried forward from the rest of the recommendations on the retail side of things. So we are looking at actually changing Flyte pages and having the recommendations much more clickable.
So one thing I didn't cover in the talk was design. I talked about a couple of pages, but another big aspect of what we've been doing is investing in design. We have a designer sitting with the team, and I mean, some of the changes have definitely come from him, and you'll see more of those. So design, he was going to do a separate talk on the design changes he's made. So design is a very, very important part of any app. I mean, that's the thing that's going to get people to, that's the thing that's going to attract users to the app. Anything else? Cool. Thank you.